It all started with a photo that shot through group chats and timelines at the speed of a breaking rumor. At a glance, nothing special. A flag fluttering over the dry slopes of the Jordan Valley. But up close, the detail that silenced meeting rooms and changed the tone of many prayers. It wasn't Israel's blue and white, nor the emblem of any country. On the light cloth, the golden outline of a temple appeared, clear as in the accounts of Scripture, the mark of the Third Temple movement. Before we continue, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, each new chapter gets to you at the right time and nothing on this journey slips by. For some, that sounded like an announcement of hope, a promise rekindled, a reminder of prophecies that span generations. For others, it tasted like a warning. Religion and territorial disputes mixing again at the most sensitive point on the map. The choice of location amplified the impact. The flag didn't go up in Jerusalem, but in a strip the international community recognizes as Palestinian, contested ground where every meter carries opposing versions of belonging. There, symbols aren't just symbols, they become statements. Those who want the temple to return read the gesture as a step forward, an affirmation that ancient visions are still on today's agenda. Those who fear an escalation saw provocation, a move designed to test limits and measure reactions. And so a few pixels turned into a stage for centuries of history compressed into a click. What message was meant to be sent? Who exactly was the intended recipient? And above all, why here? Why now? The Jordan Valley has always been more than a dry stretch on the map. Paths and destinies cross there. Along those banks, Joshua led Israel toward the Promised Land, and there Elijah lived his final moments before being taken up by the chariot of fire. The valley is a living border between scarcity and promise. Now, with that flag's appearance, it becomes a stage again, not just for political gestures, but for signs many have long awaited and long feared. Was it an isolated action by a zealous group, or a calculated message timed just right, hinting at a shift that could carry the same symbol all the way to the Temple Mount? In this region, chance rarely has a place, and once movements start, they rarely stop. While the flag lights up debates, another milestone approaches. It isn't a backroom event, it's a memory that spans centuries. Every summer, under the Middle Eastern sun, the 9th day of the month of Av arrives. For the Jewish people, it isn't a celebration, it's shared mourning, a day of ashes, fasting, and lamentations. Tisha B'Av holds two deep scars: the destruction of Solomon's temple by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and the fall of the Second Temple at the hands of Rome in the year 70. Each break left Jerusalem in ruins and the nation marked, like wounds that never fully close. By tradition, the city eases its pace, doors close, voices soften, and in that ritual quiet the past walks alongside the present, preparing the ground for what comes next. This year, the silence on the Temple Mount trembled. For decades, Jewish prayer there was held back by the so-called status quo, an arrangement meant to avoid friction by restricting worship. On Tisha B'Av, a day of mourning for the destruction of the temples, the script changed. An unusual contingent went up the mount. Many kept to quiet reflection, but some, in low voices, intoned words of hope. "We will build the temple." They weren't words of protest. They were whispers that crossed the plaza and broke a decades-long stillness. Before we go on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, each new chapter gets to you right on time and nothing in this journey slips by. For those who know the history and the prophecies tied to the plateau, the gesture felt like a deep shift. The Temple Mount brings together memories of Israel's past and, for many, points to the center of its future. The fact that these verses surfaced on the day of mourning amplified the impact. Instead of just recalling the loss, voices started talking about return. What looked like a small detail to a casual observer sounded to others like the beginning of change. And it didn't stop there. Under the glow of the Dome of the Rock with cameras and an entourage, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, walked through the compound. The visit, right after Tisha B'Av, took the issue from a whisper into the halls of power. His statement sounded like a sketch of intent. From then on, the tension between tradition, politics, and security picked up steam, and what would come next promised to turn the volume up even more. The Temple Mount is ours. The line didn't land by accident. It was deliberate, spoken into a microphone like someone pointing to a new direction. Then came the follow-up that left no doubt. Israel should rebuild the temple. Around them, small groups of Jewish visitors began slowly circling. Some murmured psalms, others hummed. For a long time, gestures like that would be stopped by the police within minutes. This time, they happened in plain sight. Since 1967, the status quo agreement has been the thread keeping a fragile calm on the Mount. No open prayer for Jews or Christians, no religious symbols, no Bibles going through the gates. The rules were there, solid on paper, until they started giving way in practice. The images from that day spoke louder than the statements. The frame was already bending. For some, that sounded like a victory. For others, a warning that the Mount was entering a new and risky phase. And it wasn't an isolated episode. It's part of a movement that's been growing for years and no longer accepts staying limited to private devotion. The return of the temple stopped being just a religious agenda. It became a political one. For decades, the topic circulated among small groups, rabbis, and organizations dedicated to teaching and ritual preparation. Now another force is organizing, testing limits, and seeking public space. And what comes after this step no longer feels so far away. Before we go on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. That way, each new chapter gets to you right on time and nothing in this journey slips by. For a long time, the temple movement's activities were internal, studying the sanctuary laws, making ritual utensils, and training priests for a possible service. In recent years, though, that world stepped out of the margins and into the public arena. It's not just devotion anymore. The movement has adopted political strategies, runs campaigns, and keeps a media presence. A turning point in this shift was a professional video released by OU Israel, a well-known Jewish organization. The piece showed 3 renderings of a rebuilt temple, scenes of worshipers from various nations, and the idea that putting up the temple could pave the way to peace. The material spread widely on social media and got coverage in the Israeli press, a sign the message broke out of the supporters' bubble. From a prophetic angle, this narrative echoes specific readings of biblical texts. In Christian eschatology, especially in Daniel and Revelation, a restored temple shows up tied to end-times events and the rise of a leader who promises peace but ends up bringing deception and conflict. Before we continue, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, so every new episode gets to you right on time and nothing in this journey goes unnoticed. The temple's image is also spreading into everyday life. Posters, educational materials, and even highway signs show it. This normalization suggests a gradual effort to plant the idea in the national imagination. The central question isn't whether there's debate about rebuilding. There is. The sensitive point is another. How would Israel get the authority to start construction at a site currently under a different religious administration? Today, the Temple Mount operates under a delicate arrangement. Security is in Israel's hands. Day-to-day management is by the Waqf, under Jordanian oversight. Any attempt to tamper with that balance would have political and diplomatic impact. Analysts point to 3 paths by which Israel could seek full control. The first runs through a broader political deal. A regional treaty with land swaps or new security guarantees could make room for clauses that expand Israeli authority over the Mount, from formal permission for Jewish worship to the possibility of building a new temple. This reading lines up with interpretations of Daniel 9:27 about an agreement set for a defined period before being broken. The second path springs from a crisis, a major attack, a military escalation, or the collapse of the current arrangement could lead Israel to take direct control on the grounds of restoring order. History records turns like that. In 1967, during the Six-Day War, control of the site shifted quickly. The third route is social and religious pressure. With more visits and Jewish practices and with favorable public opinion, leaders could turn custom into rule and formalize what partly happens today. Each path, however, carries risks, diplomatic friction, and internal costs. In the next few minutes, we'll keep unpacking what each scenario could mean for the region and why this debate remains at the center of tensions. Any change to the status quo tends to trigger chain reactions inside and outside the region. Even so, these scenarios remain on the table, debated not only by religious groups but also in political and academic forums. They don't come out of nowhere. They grow out of a picture of rising instability. The region is already going through a period of high tension. In Gaza, the conflict persists, with prolonged operations by Israeli forces. Before we go on, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. This way, every new chapter gets to you at the right time and nothing in this journey slips by. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signaled an intention to extend Israeli control over the entire Strip, a goal that, if carried out, would mark a major territorial shift. At the same time, alliances in the Middle East are being reshuffled. Normalization talks between Israel and Arab countries are moving forward, while frictions with Iran and allied groups are piling up. In this environment, a prophetic reading is gaining ground. For many, the conditions recall passages from Daniel and Revelation, a leader who makes a covenant with Israel and breaks it halfway through the period, paving the way for the so-called abomination of desolation in the temple, a stretch of apparent peace followed by global upheaval. Security analysts tend to read the board through strategy and deterrence. Religious voices, however, see a larger storyline, in which present-day events work like pieces of a clock moving toward a critical point. When political ambition, religious movements, and regional clashes intersect, the landscape changes fast. On this unstable ground, the debate about the temple returns not as a curiosity, but as a reminder. Before projecting the future, it's wise to recall what has already happened and what it says. For those who take the Bible seriously, many prophecies have been fulfilled with precision. The Old Testament speaks of the Messiah's birth from a virgin, Isa 7:14, of Bethlehem as his place of origin, Micah 5:2, of his Davidic lineage, Joran 23:5, and of suffering that would lead to death, Ps 22, Isa 53. The Gospels also record the piercing of the hands and feet and the casting of lots for the garments. In the Christian reading, it all converges in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, the promised Messiah. Even so, the story continues. The New Testament announces that in the last days a figure will arise who will enter the temple claiming divine authority. Called the Antichrist, he will deceive many. That's why, beyond treaties, building projects, and alliances, many Christians pray that the Jewish people will recognize their Messiah before the deception. What we see today, negotiations, acts of faith, military clashes, matters, but it isn't the final sign. The focus remains on the fulfillment of God's promises in His Son and the call to watchfulness, in light of what Scripture has already revealed. As the facts pile up, the question left isn't just what will be built, but who will be recognized when the next piece on the board is moved. Thanks for sticking with us this far. If this topic stirred you, drop a like, leave a comment, and share it with those who are also paying attention to the signs of our time. In the next chapter, the conversation goes deeper. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Until then, keep your eyes open, keep your heart aligned with the truth, and stay strong. We'll see you soon. Peace.